Right, hello, dear listeners. This is going to be a solo episode of the Filing Cabinet. Partly because, I don't know, arranging an episode with other people is more work than just talking into the microphone myself. Partly because I recently listened to a solo episode of a friend's podcast, Mutual Understanding. That, I don't know, was kind of fun. It was kind of nice to hear about what was up with a friend of mine, so I thought I'd give it a shot. So yeah, I guess the thing that's been going on with my life, well, I have work. I work at this organization called METS that does AI safety research internship stuff, so I don't know, obviously I have that. And then I guess my main hobby-ish thing, except I get paid for it, so it's sort of a job, is making this podcast called Excerpt, right? Where I interview AI safety research. Honestly, if you listen to this, you probably listen to Excerpt as well, or at least know about it, and are just choosing not to listen to it, probably reasonably. If you haven't, axrp.net. But my other hobby that I've taken up lately, that I'm not getting paid for, is I've decided to start studying Latin. My Audacity is just going weird. Let me stop the recording briefly. Alright, everything was fine, so I guess I'll just pick up. Yeah, so I have started learning Latin, which is kind of fun. I guess the first thing, so I've only just started. I don't know, I've been doing it for a couple of weeks, but not long enough that I can deliver this podcast in Latin or something like that. I'm just getting a handle on how to say I talk versus he talks. It's that sort of thing. And the first thing to say about it is it's surprisingly, the content of it is surprisingly not that interesting to talk about. I guess I know etymology a little bit better, right? I'm audio. I guess that comes from audio, which means I hear, but it's I don't know if I think most people I know are roughly familiar with the fact that a bunch of things come from Latin words. So I don't know. It's mostly not that interesting. I guess the most interesting thing about it is just observations on the process, right? Which I think I guess I'm well equipped to deliver. At least the process, that I've been undertaking, as developed by the process of me going to Reddit and seeing what r/Latin recommends, and then exploring a little bit. And of course, it's early days, which is very important to say. There are different kinds of things people do at different times. But yeah, let me say a little bit about the process early on. So firstly, I think one cool thing about it is there's this autodidact community, right, of people who are I think it would be cool if I learned Latin, so I'm going to do it. And they get together on the internet, and they have their Discord servers and stuff. And it's kind of cool. There's something nice about the scene being driven by people who are actually choosing to learn the language because they want to, right? I learned Japanese in high school, and it was great. I really liked it. I don't know, I'll still watch the occasional anime or listen to the occasional bit of J-pop, and I'll try and understand the lyrics. I'm not fluent by any means, but I don't know, I did go to Japan a couple times, and I don't know, it was fun. But the process was, right, I showed up to class, and then, there was a teacher, and the teacher went through the textbook, and they, prepared me for the exams that we had in Japanese, and, conformed to the curriculum. And it was not, at least the schooling part of it, was not especially driven by what is the best way I can actually just learn Japanese. Now, I did do some Japanese stuff, for fun. But mostly that was what are some fun things I can do with Japanese, right? So I don't know, listening to music, I did that because, I guess partly because I thought it would help learning, but also probably because it was fun, right? Similarly, I remember one birthday, so I got this book. It was all about particles in Japanese. So a particle is just a thing you add to the end of the word. of a word to indicate like what its function in the sentence is. So the equivalent is like prepositions in English, right? Like you might say like I'm going to the garden, right? To the word to and to the garden is like that's saying like what role the garden is playing in the whole sentence. Similarly, niwa ni iku, right? Niwa is garden, and niwa ni means you're going to the garden. Yeah. And Japanese has a lot of them, and I don't know. For a birthday when I was a kid, I got this book that was just like all about Japanese particles. And I think I read that partly because like that was partly driven by I just find it fun to learn stuff about the language, and I find it fun to like decode stuff. You know, like they have this way of speaking, and I'm gonna decode it. You know, I'm gonna like figure out their secrets, which is honestly like very close to actually my motivation for learning Latin. Right, I'm not like, oh, I desperately need to read Cicero in the original language or Caesar in the original language or anything. I'm just like it's fun learning languages. But anyway, there's this whole community who are driven by like, look, I just want like I'm motivated to learn the language. There's stuff I want to read. I want to be able to read it. And because they're adults, you know, for the most part at least, you know, they're able to like, they're a set of people with their own market power, right? There's this market for things that are like good at teaching you Latin well. And as a result, so firstly, just it means that second language research is just more incorporated. It's like suffused a bit more throughout the community. Now, honestly, I'm not sure how good. Like if I think about just how good a study like one can possibly run in this space, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how much I believe these results, but the current orthodoxy within second language research is second language acquisition research is that the thing you want to do is you just want to have lots of comprehensible input, right? So to learn a language, you just like read and listen to a bunch of stuff in the language that you can mostly understand. And well, how do you mostly understand it? Well, like one can be like, I don't know, if someone like if I hold up a horse, right, and I say equus est, right? It's like, oh, okay, equus is probably horse, and I don't know, if you speak English or Spanish or something, you probably can guess that est is like means it is, right? So partly it can be that. Partly like once you have a few words, then you can use the words you have to explain more words, right? But basically, like comprehensible input. This is like supposed to be the main thing, and just like way more effective for learning languages than anything else. And I kind of buy that. You know, it seems like very related to how people learn their first language. And like if you believe this, it means that, you know, you're gonna have different textbooks that you gravitate to. You're gonna have like different language learning activities that you gravitate to. And as a result, there's just a market for making textbooks that work like that, or making, you know, readers that work like that, or you know, I'm not doing like in-person education stuff, but if I wanted to take a class, there are classes that are offered to, you know, serve this market and like do it this way. So I don't know. Overall, I think like that's a pretty healthy part of the ecosystem, right? That it's like competing to serve the needs of people who are like trying to do the thing. Unlike school materials, which are, you know, like I think a lot of teachers by and large are really trying, like they really like the subject and they're really like trying to impart the cool parts of the subject. But, you know, they're like schools make decisions based on like, you know, can they like get students to pass exams, and like, you know, often the students don't really want to be there, and the exams don't actually like necessarily test the actual thing. I think this is more true for stuff like, I don't know, language or arts or something, where it's like with physics, you know, physics really is mostly just about like knowing enough facts and being able to like manipulate facts that you know, whereas like language is like, have you acquired this language? Are you able to like fluently read and understand stuff? And it's like, well, I mean, at the end of the process, right, you can test if someone like fluently understands Latin by like just giving them some, I don't know, some fable by Ovid and saying like, okay, here's this fable, read it and answer 10 questions about it, right? But like, you know, you want to be able to test people midway, and it's like, if you do that, you're sort of imposing your vision of like the order in which people can learn things, and you can be wrong, and often schools are wrong. And anyway, all of this is to say, it's I don't know, there's some cool energy, right? You can go into the subreddit and like people are like trying to be useful and giving like language learning tips. It's pretty cool. In terms of actually learning, so the textbook I'm using is called Lingua Latina per se illustrata. So Latin language by illustrations, I guess. And basically what it is it's this reader. It's entirely in Latin, and it just like it's a bunch of chapters, and they like gradually level up the Latin, right? So the first chapter they have like they just have a map of the Mediterranean and Europe during, I guess, when the Roman Empire existed, and they're like, yeah, they just have a bunch of sentences like Roma in Italia est, Italia in Europa est, and you know, meaning obviously like Rome is in Italy, Italy is in Europe, and you know they'll be like Tiber fluvius est, right? Like Tiber is a river, and you can get what it means because it's just like you can look at the map and you can see what's Tiber? Oh, there it is. Or I guess it's Tiberius. Oh man, I'm failing Latin already. But you know, it just like starts with some very basic words, and then like in the next thing it like has words for family and like, you know, just pictures of like, you know, puer, which means boy, and there's a picture of a boy and next to the word puer. But the picture and the word are like on the side. Like the main thing is just like a bunch of text, right? You know, just like talking about this family or whatever. So I don't know, it just like gradually like increases in difficulty, and it gradually increases words and increases like grammatical structures that are formed, and it's like pretty well laid out. There are a few similar things. So I think like in the UK, Cambridge Latin course is just like a series of textbooks that are taught from the UK that have mostly a similar approach. Cambridge Latin course, the textbooks contain some English, whereas like Lingua Latina contains no English, which is like kind of cool, but like I don't know, some English, it's probably not too bad. But like I think the criticism I've heard of Cambridge Latin course is that although it's trying to do the same thing, there's like less Latin text and they introduce, you know, words too quickly, and you know. Anyway, so it's a cool textbook. One thing that I'm finding strange about like, and this seems to be true of like most Latin textbooks, is they're very slavery forward. Like when you learn Japanese, I don't know, maybe I'm just forgetting this, but I feel like it was not the case that during the first few lessons, like they taught you the word for like ritual suicide or something. Whereas in Latin textbooks, it seems to be like very common that like some of the first words you word are like male slave and female slave. And on the one hand, this kind of like I see where they're coming from, right? So like it genuinely was like an important part of Roman society, right? Like they had slaves, or well, they had slaves is a weird way of saying it, right? Like they were slaves is maybe a better way of saying it, depending on who you like want to empathize with, but which is a weird anyway. They had slaves. There were slaves in Roman society. Like a bunch of people were slaves. And you know, like I don't know, like I respect the idea of like not hiding that. And also it's just like pedagogically pretty useful to have these words that like words for type of people are good because you can say like, oh yeah, you know, the boy asks the mother such and such, or like the slave tells the girl such and such, right? And also they're like Latin words. I don't want to go into it, but there are different like kinds of nouns, and like it's when you're starting off, it's convenient to only look at nouns of one kind so that you can get used to them, and like the words for male slave and female slave are of the same kind. So I don't know. I guess it makes sense. On the other hand, I don't know, man. Slavery is pretty messed up. And it's very like so at least the textbook I'm using is very like so one way to illustrate this, right, is like so it's a textbook. There's stuff written in Latin, and there are these, you know, someone's made some YouTube videos of them just like reading them in Latin using like what we know about, you know, using like basically the academic community's best guess of how Latin sounded, and it's kind of good because you can like, you know, practice hearing a thing instead of just reading a thing. It's probably useful for language. So I know I'm doing that. And then, like, in the comments of chapter 3, right? And the chapters are not that long, so this is pretty early in the book, right? Like, there are 35 chapters in this textbook, so chapter 3, pretty early, right? And in the comments on the video of this for chapter 3, one of them is saying, like, man, only Latin textbooks, in chapter 3 do you learn how to tell your slave to, like, shut the hell up and listen, or else he gets the beating stick. And he was, like, slightly hyperbolic. Like, the or else, I think was not taught back then. But, like, be quiet, listen, slave, beating stick. Like those were all, in fact, words that were taught by chapter 3. And it's like, I don't know, man. It's pretty messed up. Even, like, I think in chapter 2, like, it makes a point of saying, like, oh yeah, the like father and mother kids are Romans and all the slaves are Greeks. It's like, oh, that's, wow, we really, like, bringing forth the ethnic divisions there. And I think there's some awareness of this, right? Like, I don't know, the humanities, I think, overall seem like they're a relatively weak field. And I know the Cambridge Latin course, they put out revisions every so often, and, like, my understanding is that they're putting out a revision that, like, centers the lives of the slaves a little bit more. But it's weird. It's, like, it's kind of jarring. Especially this textbook, which was written in, like, the 60s, or was it, maybe it's 70s or 80s, I'm not totally sure. But, like, it is not, it's had some revisions, but it's not the one that I'm using has had some revisions, but not a ton of revisions. So it's a little bit weird. And then also another weird thing is, like, so the word for female slave in Latin is ancilla, and it's where we get the word ancillary. And I feel like I've seen, like, ancillary is not a word that I see used very much. I don't know if I'm in a weird bubble, but I, it's not that common a word. But I feel like I see it on the blurb of, like, every second Latin textbook. And, like, I don't know if it's just, like, an unconscious thing, or, because, and they do have more ancillary things, right? Because on your textbook you want to be like, oh yeah, we've got the textbook, but we've also have this workbook and this other thing that explains some things. So I don't know, maybe they have some reason to use it more. But I don't know if they use the word more just because they're, like, they're seeing the word ancilla way more, or if they want to, like, deliberately, like, prime that. But I don't know. That's just kind of a weird thing that I've noticed about them. But yeah, I don't know. I guess as a result of this, I'm on chapter 15 of this textbook, and I know, like, 3 different words for kinds of slaves, and 2 words for things that you might use to hit your children. So that's weird. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not, like, I guess I'm not, like, super. It hasn't, like, put me off of it totally. I guess I'm not as bothered by it viscerally, but, like, yeah, kind of strange. What else is there to say? So I guess one thing that I also found kind of funny is, so because of the belief in comprehensible input, that, there's this big market for books that, like, people who are learning Latin can read, that are, like, not too hard, that are, like, kind of interesting, that you can use just to, like, get your reps in, right? Just, like, get practice reading stuff, and have the thing be moderately interesting, and not have the thing just be like, oh yeah, just, like, read the same textbook chapter 3 times, right? And so who's doing this? Well, I think largely it's Latin teachers, right? People who are teaching Latin in schools. That's, like by far the like, if somebody's, like, being taught to teach Latin, probably they're at a school, because there are just, like, tons of schools that teach, like high schools stuff, right? There are tons of high schools. There are tons of high schools that teach Latin, and so, if you teach Latin, you've got to employ a Latin teacher. There are, I guess, comparatively fewer positions where people are paid to teach Latin in other capacities, for instance, to adult learners or to university students. And so you have these, like, high school teachers writing these Latin textbooks, right? And, they're doing it, like, in their spare time, and they're feeling this, like, need in the community, and so that's very nice. But also, like, there's this relatively small world of professional Latin teachers, right? And, they have their forums, and they, like, get together, and, like, I guess the prominent ones must know each other. But the other awkward thing is, because Latin is... So like, okay, Latin is, like, basically not a spoken language, right? Now, that's not totally true, right? There are meetups where you can, like, only speak Latin to each other, and, like, there's this whole living Latin movement where, people try and, like, just get practice at, like, speaking Latin in real life in sort of ordinary ways to, like, improve their grasp on language. And, like, okay, but, like, nobody natively speaks Latin up to some round. I don't know. Probably there's one kid with weird parents, but, like, basically nobody natively speaks Latin. And as a result, like, I don't know, if you teach Latin, like, there's only so much immersion you can get, right? And so there's only so much opportunity for fluency you can get. And if you're a teacher, you don't have to be, like, perfectly fluent in the Latin in the language to teach it to high school students, right? Like, you need to be able to just, like, provide them with good resources. You need to be able to notice, like, people's grammatical errors. And you need to be, like, better than having no teacher, and good enough to help people pass tests. But it is possible to be a good teacher and to be the kind of teacher who, if you try and write a novella, you're sometimes going to have, like, spelling errors or grammar errors, right? And so, I don't know. But what this means is that, firstly, a lot of people, or like the people who try and write these novellas, often, apparently they have errors in them. So that's a bit dispiriting, right? Like as someone who's in the market, because, like, they're not for free, right? You buy these. And per page, because they're, like, pretty short books, they're, like, more expensive than other things you might buy. And some of them have errors in them. But the thing that's, like, even more bothering is that apparently, and I don't know, I'm reading about this, so, like, it's possible that it's changed, but apparently, like, not only do, like, some of these products, like, that are being sold to learners have errors in them, also, in the community of Latin teachers, it is considered rude to point this out. Like apparently, like, if someone is, like, announcing their novella, being like, oh, hey, I made this thing for Latin learners, it costs $10 on my website. Like, apparently if you say, oh, yeah, this, there's a spelling error on page 6, or, God forbid, you say, like, oh, this is, like, weird Latin style, right? But because, like, if you think about English, right? Like, if people learn English as a second language, often they, like, say things that are technically grammatical, but, like, they're structures that are ported from the language that they're from, and they are not necessarily, like, it's not necessarily idiomatic English, right? Similar with, like, idiomatic Latin is a thing. It's a bit less of a thing because, like, people spoke Latin for, like, hundreds of years and in different places and, like, use idiom, but the Latin community, like, mostly has, there's mostly this standard of, like, oh yeah, when we say Latin, we essentially mean the thing that, like, Cicero spoke, and then, like, a few other people, and, we're gonna draw the boundaries around there. And anyway, like, idiomatic Latin is a thing that exists, right? And, like, God forbid that you criticize, like, a textbook for, like, not having idiomatic, like, Latin, like, because, I mean, at least if you wanted to accuse a thing of having a spelling mistake, you'd be able to prove it. Whereas, like, this thing isn't idiomatic, that's going to be more arguable. So apparently there's this norm where you can't really criticize novellas. Or, like, you can criticize them for not having, like, a diverse enough array of characters, or for, like, the word count or something. But, like, you're not supposed to criticize errors because, like, the person worked really hard on this, and it's, like, it was a labor of love, and they're not making that much money off it anyway, and, like, it's kind of negativity or something. But, like, as the position of someone who's, like, a consumer of these things, it's crazy, right? Now, luckily, you can see people, like, if you go to, like, the subreddit and search for things, you could see people, like, criticize the genre. But, like, not even that specifically, right? Like, I don't know, when I think I searched on r/Latin for posts about Latin novellas, and there was one post saying, like, hey, yeah, I found this really discouraging. I read one, and the second word in the book was misspelled. Like the second Latin word in the book, on page 1 was misspelled. But they didn't say what novella it was. So, like, So this market is just like the market is just totally messed up, and oh man, it's just like very very unsatisfying. Now you might hope. So I don't know. I've like complained about this to a few friends of mine, and a few people have said, oh, like probably what if you just get like some large language model to spell check it, right? And like so there's this question of like, okay, is this a thing that large language models are good at? So I don't like have a paid subscription to any. I do have a I don't know that like Claude you can use for free to some amount. So I have used Claude Sonnet 3.5 new to evaluate some stuff. But also like I don't know, an experiment I ran was I just like gave it a little short story written for learners and I asked if there were any errors in it and it said no. And then I took this short story and then I like added some errors and I asked Claude if there was any errors and Claude also said no. So apparently Claude is not like that proficient at it, which makes sense. Like there's much less Latin text than there is like text in other languages, and I don't know, maybe the tokenizer is not optimized to make this obvious for large language models. But anyway, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like this can be automated away. Although to be fair, so that was in the setting where like you just like give it text. If you have a book, probably the thing you would be doing is like taking pictures of the pages. I imagine that's probably going to be harder for models, but I don't know. It's possible that they're better at it. Anyway, it just means that like there's this class of learner material which like is not which as a beginner you're obviously like not in a position to evaluate such things, right? And then like the people who are paid to tell you whether things are good like have some sort of weird conspiracy of silence. So I don't know, I find that like very frustrating and annoying. It's like crazy to me, especially because like if it worked it would just be this like very useful resource, right? But that's life. Yeah, I guess the one thing that's the one saving grace is that there's so there's this one guy called Daniel Pettersson who's like he's a Swedish guy who like he has this website Latinium or Latinitium. I forget exactly what it's called. And he like makes Latin learning content, and like he has a pretty good reputation among the Latin speaking community. I've heard like a lot of people praise him. I've heard nobody like criticize him significantly or criticize his like Latin abilities. So I mean he has his own little app where you can like read a bunch of like little short stories for beginners in Latin. And like so I don't know, I have some input through that because like there at least I get to say like, okay, well I trust like the reputation of this one particular person. I mean, now that I say this, I wonder if there's a Baptists and bootleggers situation, right? Like, I wonder if this guy is actually secretly evil and promoting a norm where you're not allowed to criticize like anyone else's novellas to produce a situation. That's probably not true, but it would be amusing if so. Yeah, and that app is called Legentibus. I recommend it if you're considering learning Latin. But yeah, that's a funny little thing about the Latin learning community. What else is there to say? I mean, I guess one thing to say is like it's a bit. There's this question of like how valuable it is a rabbit hole to go down, because like I'm not. So like why did I decide to learn Latin? I don't know. Partly it's just I just enjoy learning languages, as I mentioned before. The concrete stimulus was like I don't know. I was recently on holiday. Went to Princeton to visit some friends, and I don't know. I was like walking around and I saw these like monuments with stuff carved in Latin on them, and I was like, damn, I should be able to read that, And so that's what gave me the idea. But it's not like, oh, I think this is like really useful, right? Or like, oh, this is gonna really like help me in my job, or just help me understand important things. I'm like, this is kind of fun. And on the one hand, I don't know, it's like a little bit like I like that it's stretching my mind. I like that it's like engaging with like the bit where if I get good enough to like read, for instance, like Julius Caesar has this book. It's called like On the Gallic War, I guess. Where he just talks about like his, you know, quest to conquer all of France or whatever, and like what the people were like and what the battles were like, and like, you know that's kind of interesting, right? If you, like if I can read that in the, you know, that'll involve like learning some stuff about ancient Roman civilization and ancient Gallic civilization, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I could just read that in English, like. So in some ways, it's just less productive of a hobby than other hobbies that I could have. It's less like, and it also encourages you to get down with these right? Like once you learn ancient Latin, then it's like, then they're like, oh yeah, well, you know, like all the best writers in classical Latin, you know, they all knew Greek. They were all reading Greek, and so to really understand them, you've also got to learn Greek, ancient Greek, right? And then, and now I'm like, oh man, maybe I should learn like classical Chinese. Like there's this whole community, right, of people who learn ancient languages, because like, I don't know, like whether you're learning like ancient Greek or classical Chinese, it's like you run into like some similar problems, like in that there are no living speakers of the thing, right? It's like some of the same constraints are applying to everyone, and they're all people who are interested in ancient texts, and I guess there's some personality similarities. So there's a question for me of like, how much do I want to like really dive in here? Because on the one hand, like it is fun, and it is, and I don't know. I think it would be cool to read the Analects, you know, in the original language. But also, I don't know. It would be nice if my hobby was more connected to stuff that mattered more, you know. like if it was more like if I was obsessed with ancient economic history, right, or like you know, fabric manufacturing, like in some ways that would feel more wholesome, but I don't know, at the same time it's kind of cool and I'm enjoying myself, so why not? But yeah, that's, I don't know, I think that's all I have to say that's like particularly interesting on that topic. I hope you found it somewhat interesting also. It's been nice monologuing into a microphone. Yeah, perhaps I will inflict this on you again. Well, goodbye.